Welcome, everyone, and thank you, SCORE, for hosting us. Steve Manners and myself, Brian Freed. We have a very interesting presentation today for you, and it can be whether you have an idea for a product, a business, or you have an existing product line that's already out in the market, and now you want to extend your brand with some brand property licensing. Maybe you want to have a character, or maybe you want to have the Nike swoosh on your product. So, Steve and I will be going through the different steps of how to come up with an idea. When you do have that idea, you have that product, how to be able to uh, add those type of brand properties to your product. So, Steve, maybe we could start off and if you can introduce yourself, and then I'll do the same after you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. So I'm Steve Manners. I'm the head of global marketing and UK managing director for Licensing International, which is the trade organization for the licensing industry. And I'll be coming back a little bit later to give you a little bit more information about what we do, how we work, and then talking more about licensing. And I'm delighted to be with you today.
Steve, I have to say, you gave a quick intro. You have such an extensive background in the licensing field. I'd love to learn a little bit more about, but you're going to have a really great uh, bunch of information to share. So maybe you can kind of intertwine what your experience, because it's great. When Score asked to put this licensing program together, I got the best.
Thank
So Steve from
thank you.
Licensing International is here with us. Quick info on me. I'm an inventor. I have 15 patents. I've licensed products, so I've earned royalties from them, and that's why I feel like I'm an expert here to go over this information with you. I've also started inventor clubs, and now I have the National Inventor Club I run. I created an app in October called the Inventor Smart Community app. I've also authored 3 books. My latest one is How to Make Money with Your Invention Idea, and just constantly active with working with people with ideas and figuring out, is it something that possibly they should license to earn royalties from, or to manufacture, or maybe it's something that you realize that maybe it's not the one, and you can work on your next idea or come up with your next idea, because if you're in that zone, you'll come up with the next one. Right, Steve?
Indeed, absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started. Steve will step aside for a little bit. I'm going to go through some slides with you, and then we'll have Steve come back on. So here we are. We have an idea in our head. Well, let's skip that step. Okay, so coming up with your idea. Maybe those of you who are watching don't have an idea yet, or maybe you're thinking of an idea. But how do you come up with it? Well, you wake up in the morning, your alarm clock goes off, you're in the bathroom probably, maybe you're brushing your teeth or getting ready, using hair dryers, brushes, whatever. Then you're in the kitchen, you're using utensils, you're using different kitchen gadgets, all different types of things. So what really inspires you? Well, for me, when I am doing these daily routines, and you can even be working from home, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're in the car taking public transportation, you're driving your kid to school, whatever it is. There's so many things that are going on around you on a daily basis. And those of us who stop and capture that idea, that's how you come up with it. So it could be for a product, it could be for a business. I like to say, for me, most of the time when something annoys me, I find a way to be able to come up with a solution. So that's what inspires me. So you find what inspires you. Maybe there's something that you're working on every single day, and you have an idea that you want to commercialize. So think about it. But once you do come up with that idea, you got to capture it, because you and I both know, as soon as something goes off, an alarm clock goes off, somebody honks at you, somebody calls you, sends a text message, poof, your idea is gone. So you want to be able to capture it as soon as possible. Very, very important. Capture that idea, otherwise it's gone. Okay. And I touch a little bit on the last slide about feasibility, and I'm just going to kind of roll it into this one. So, look, when you come up with an idea, you get very excited, it's emotional, you want it to be something that possibly could change your life. Maybe it's something that you're just happy just having a patent. Whatever it is, you want to figure out, is it something that you could call your own? And good way to do that is simple. These days, there's so many different solutions out there, even a simple search online to be able to put in descriptive terms about your idea. It doesn't have to be exactly, but descriptive terms, maybe the similar type of things. And what's making yours different than everybody else's out there? Yes, you can get into market research and competitive analysis, and you can also take a look and see, it's interesting because sometimes when people come to me and I go through their ideas with them, uh, a lot of times it's an interesting idea, but are you making me do the same thing in 3 or 4 more steps? Or are you making me take a step back, so I'm saving a step, but now you're making me clean something that might take me more time to do? So what I like to do is think about what my window of opportunity is. And, a lot of times you can come up with something specifically for one type of reason you came up with it, but maybe that might be a niche one. Maybe there's other ways to get it higher up in that window of opportunity. This way, there's a bigger audience. So maybe what you came up with might be 3 or 4 or fifth on the list, and you might come up with the first one. That happens a lot. People come to me with a specific idea, and we end up finding 2, 3, 4 other opportunities from it, and maybe yours might be the third one on that list. So very, very important. There's plenty of ways to do competitive analysis, market research. You can do business plans and kind of just scope out where you are. Small Business Development Center is a very big resource for me that I love to let people know about. And of course, you have SCORE also to be able to help you with different types of research. And again, I'm going to give a quick brief overview here, and we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of licensing, and then we'll have Steve come on to do the brand property licensing. But look, we all have to start off with this idea. So some of you who are just starting off, or maybe you're in these steps, I wanted to just quickly go over them with you before we get into more of the licensing. So look, a prototype is really, really important for me. If I have an idea in my head, I want to be able to see if it's something that I can call my own. And then I like to make a prototype. One of my prototypers just sent me a gift. Look at this. This is actually a 3D prototype. Unbelievable. It's a dragon. So prototypes are really important. When I first started, it was very difficult, and I'm outdated. I'm making myself older here, but when I first started, it was hard to find somebody with a 3D printer. Now you can buy 3D printers in the stores, and they're desktop. It's very easy. There's services that are available that you can create a CAD file and be able to upload it to a 3D printer. There are people that do product design, CAD drawing type of services that you can take what is in your head and be able to make it into a CAD file and be able to put it into a 3D print. So some of you might have a plastic type of product. Some of you might have wood. So maybe it's a CNC type of cut. Maybe it's metal where you're bending and molding. Maybe it's a cut and sew project. I know there's plenty of people out there with apparel lines and different things that they're doing, especially apparel is interesting when it comes to brand property licensing, which we'll get to. So the kind of the moral of this one is to be able to say, you know what? I came up with this idea. It's in my head. I feel like there's a good opportunity for it from the last slide or two that we talked about. And now I want to be able to see it in front of me and create something that I could see, feel, try to make it work as best as possible. Okay, so protecting your idea. I showed you before an actual patent. I think now they're sending electronic patents to us. I have a couple more pending, so we'll see if I get the paper, if I get the electronic. But look, when you come up with this idea and you're going through the steps, it's really important to start with to do a patent search with a patentability opinion. And when I'm talking about saying that it's something that you can call your own, it's really important because there's so many times where I talk to people and they're at step 6 or 7, and they didn't take the simple step in the beginning to do a patent search. And I like to do this patentability opinion. So if you pull prior art and you look at the claims that are in these patents, it might be a little confusing to you and I. So there are patent attorneys and patent agents that are out there to be able to help us to kind of decipher, is this something that is overlapping? Is it somebody else's invention, or is it something that could be mine? And those are the type of things that I need to know before I continue to move forward. So here I am. I got pretty close in my prototype to what I think is going to be something that I can move forward with. And this is a really important step now, because at this point, what do I want to do with my intellectual property? Am I going to license it to receive royalties? Am I going to manufacture my idea? And I'm going to go through both of them here along these slides here. But I have this intellectual property. I can have more options when I have intellectual property, because if I'm going to license something to receive royalties, then what are they going to pay me for? I'm going to rent the rights to my intellectual property to receive royalties. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into that. But if I'm going to manufacture it, I have protection. A design patent is for 15 years. So maybe it's just ornamental. Maybe there's no twists and turns and gears, and it's something how it looks. And that could be a design patent. If it's a utility patent, it could be something that you can obtain 20 years of intellectual property protection with that patent. And listen, I'm not a patent attorney or agent. I'm not giving legal advice here, but sharing my opinion and my experiences that when you do have a utility patent that's issued, most of the time you're going to have better chances of a licensing deal, because you're giving them the rights to your intellectual property where they're manufacturing, they're distributing, and you're earning a royalty from it. And you're giving them a competitive advantage in the market to have your particular invention that they're going to show the buyers. And the only place to buy is from them, which you rented the rights to them. So that's really important. I think some people might be a little bit more lenient with intellectual property. Some manufacturers, which we can call licensees in this way. So if you have the patent, or you filed for the patent, or you have an invention, you could be the licensor. The company that you go to are the licensee. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that in a little while, but it's really important to pay attention to this step. And that's why I spent a few extra seconds on this, is to know if your idea is something that you can patent and call your own, you have better options. And definitely take advantage of finding out. It's very interesting to know what is similar out there. Is it enough of a difference, or are you hitting a brick wall and maybe it's something that you should move on to your next idea? Or if it's in the public domain, let's say the patent is over 15 years old or 20 years old for the utility patent, 15 for the design, then it's public. It's in the public domain, so anybody can make it. You won't be able to patent it most likely unless you change enough of a difference to it. So not to get too deep into this, just touching on some intellectual property here. All right, so what is licensing? Well, I mentioned it before. So licensing means that, let's say I came up with this invention, and maybe I'm too busy. Maybe it's something that I don't have the money or time, or let's say if I did manufacture something, I don't know what to do next with it. Maybe I have 3,000 units in my garage. What am I going to do? So instead of manufacturing and going into the whole retail side, you can come up with an idea and you could say, you know what? I came up with something, and what I want to do is go to a company that already has similar type of products out in the market, and I'm going to knock on their door. And it could be LinkedIn, it could be on making a phone call, an email, and just trying to make a connection to the company. And I usually look for different levels of the company to be able to get in touch with them. Sometimes I'll call the president or the VP, or sometimes they might have a licensing person that's involved in their company. So licensing means that I'm going to the company that is in the same space most of the time, and I'm going to see if they're interested in adding my product to their product line. Does it align well? Is it something that's going to give them a competitive advantage? Is it something that they're going to sell enough of to make it worthwhile for them and for you? And these are the type of things that we go through to figure out if licensing makes sense. So a lot of times people come to me with an idea that might be very inexpensive, And by the time it's done, it might not be worth it, or it might be very niche. And the company says, you know what, Brian, I love this product, but I don't think I'm going to sell enough of them. So maybe we'll have to pass. So you can continue to go off on your own, and we could talk about manufacturing afterwards. But the benefits of licensing, you don't have to worry about manufacturing, distribution, accounts payable, accounts receivable, returns, promotions. You know, when you use those coupons in the retail stores, you think the retailer's taking that off? No. Whoever you bought from is most likely going to have to pay for that coupon or for that promo. So these are things that you would have to be responsible for if you manufactured. But if you're licensing, most of the time you're putting the risk on the licensee. You're the licensor, they're the licensee, and they're responsible for all that, and you're going to earn a percentage of it. And I'll get to that in a little while. So for me, when I go into trying to find licensing opportunities, I'm going to show you a couple things. So here, which one should I show first? All right. Well, there was a point where I was, even before COVID, I didn't like when people were scooping their hands into bowls, taking pretzels, potato chips at a party, or peanuts or whatever. So I wanted to create some kind of scooping mechanism. And I came up with this sphere type of thing, this ball that opens up. And after a while, it started to look interesting with a face on it. So I went to a company that made snack containers, and I showed them my kind of scooper. And they said, you know what, Brian, we have a potential deal with Sesame Street. So why don't we put Sesame characters on your snack container? And you might have seen these in Walmart and drugstores and supermarkets. And yes, I'm showing you Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We had a line of those going back in the day. Now it's generic, so we don't have the characters on, but we have cats and dogs and things like that. But the point I was going to make here is that when you manufacture, when the company who I licensed this design to manufactures it, they have to pay me and they have to pay Sesame Street or Nickelodeon a royalty. Okay, I'll show you another example. So here, I came up with these tongues that have an adjustment inside this locking mechanism. So, you know, when you buy a set of tongs, it pulls up and it locks in place. Well, I made grooves in these and I got a patent on it. So if you were going to the store and you were going to buy a set of tongs, and this one had an adjustable, so you can open it small, medium, and large, and they were the same price as another set of tongs, which one would you buy? Right? So maybe there's another brand that has a set of tongs, but this one for the same price has an adjustable set there. So that's why these type of things are potential winners, because you have a chance to give a company a competitive advantage, an extra feature, a new product opportunity for their buyers to see, and ultimately to the consumers to buy. All right, so very, very important to understand what licensing is. So let's say now a product cost $2 to make. And this is kind of interesting, the way that this could work. I'm just thinking if I want to go over this in a little further slide, but why not? Let me just talk to you about how to make money when you're licensing. So let's say a product costs the manufacturer $2 to make, and they sell it to Walmart for $4, and Walmart sells it for $7.99, just as an example. On the $4, which was wholesale, you would receive a royalty. Now, royalties vary in all different industries and categories. So let's say you call it a 5% royalty. Okay, so on the $4, so it's $2 to make, $4 wholesale, $7.99 retail. So on the $4, 5% is what, 20 cents per unit. So you understand, at the 20 cents, it seems like very little, but there's minimal risk to you. You're responsible for your intellectual property. But think about it. They're doing everything. They have tight margins. They're getting beat up by the buyers, right? Most of the time, you need a full product line to be able to get into a retail store. It's not impossible to get an individual, one SKU, one product in a retail store. It's much more difficult, because many times the buyers want established brands that are in there because they're responsible for that shelf space and they have to produce. And if they don't, most of the time, they're not going to have a job anymore. So they want to go with established brands. And, like when I've gone into buyers with product, they say, Brian, Gary, this one, go to them and tell them that we're interested in doing a deal and have your product added to their product line where you'll earn a royalty from it. So that's where I really started to get into licensing almost 20 years ago to really start to take my inventions, and some I could manufacture, but I decided to go into licensing, and some I still do manufacture. But it's when they're selling, it's great. Some products have cycles to them. Sometimes they can come back. It's just timing, it's placement, it's the company who you license to. You want to make sure that they're active. And I gave you like a 5% royalty kind of gauge there. But, if a company sells really high volume, or maybe they have a character that they're adding to it, you got to be cognizant of like how much they have to put out. So if they put a character on it, it might be less of a royalty. If they're getting squeezed by buyers and the margins are tight, it might be less than that 5%. If it's a company that really has not that great of distribution and they have bigger margin, maybe they'll give you more. Hey, I could give you 100% to zero too, right? So you want to try to be respectful, because you're a partner. They have all the overhead, they have salespeople, they have manufacturing, they have the risk. So you want to try to balance that out and make it so it's worthwhile for them and for you. All right, so look, I went through licensing, so we knock on doors, and I'm going to go through kind of how to find a licensing opportunity. But look, maybe you might want to consider manufacturing. A lot of times people's perceptions of how much a product costs is a lot different. I was working with this lady many years ago, and I like to tell this story. We were trying to license. She didn't get a licensing deal. And I said, why don't you manufacture? She said, what? Manufacturing? Oh, I don't want to do that. I said, why? Well, it costs too much. Well, how much is it? Take a guess. Okay. So let's say my product, it was a silicone type of item, an accessory. So she said, I don't know, maybe $25,000 for the tooling. And how much per unit you think? I don't know, maybe $3 or $4. And okay, so let's get some quotes. So I got some quotes, and next thing you know, the mold for it was $600 per unit, 80 cents per unit. Yeah, but Brian, I got to make 100,000 of those overseas, and 3,000 units minimum. Wow, 3,000 times 80 cents, $2,400. The mold, $600. $3,000 for 3,000 units. A little bit for shipping and a couple other ancillary type of charges. But look, now she's in business for herself. 3,000 units sold, 3,000. But she's the brand, she's the face of her product, and she can extend that brand. And we'll get to that with Steve in a little while. So perception, yes, it is more money to manufacture here in the US. If you can balance that out between the cost and everything else associated with manufacturing, maybe it works for you in the US, maybe it works for you overseas. I've had experience both, and I lean more towards manufacturing overseas. It has to be, otherwise sometimes when I'm manufacturing in the US, the price is more than what somebody would pay for. So it won't give me the chance to be in business. So I have to balance that out. And that's what I do with a lot of people, is figure out if it's something that makes sense. So yeah, if I'm hitting a brick wall with licensing, then I'm going to go to manufacturing, or I wait and I go back again to try to license it. And I'm going to go through how to find a licensee. Okay, so here we are. We came up with this idea. We did a good patent search. We have a prototype. We protected our idea, at least with a patent pending. So a lot of people use a provisional patent application. So that'll give you the right for 1 year to say that you're patent pending while you're exploring the market. You might not have an issued patent, but you'll be patent pending. The patent office doesn't look at it until you file that non-provisional patent application within the year. And before that year, you file so you have the non-provisional. And usually it takes about 2 years or so till a patent examiner looks at it and then decides an office action on you, and you have to overcome that most of the time, and then hopefully you get an issued patent. So like I said earlier, some might require you to have an issued patent. Some are okay with patent pending. I've licensed a product without any intellectual property, but it was based on relationship. So what do you need to do to prepare your pitch? I always like to have at least a really good prototype made, the best that I can. I understand sometimes it could be crude. That's fine. Maybe it's a wind turbine, and it's something that's not practical to make a prototype. So make a 3D animated video. Do something to be able to show without spending so much time explaining it. If you can explain it, that's great. Show me a picture. Show me a video. Make something so, excuse me, I can see what it is that speaks for itself. So some people use sell sheets. Some people make the videos. Some people show pictures. Some people explain it. For me, the best opportunity has been with a prototype. And if I'm not face to face with them at a trade show or in person, then I send it with a video, maybe a minute and a half video. But it's not a long-winded, hi, my name is Brian, I'm the lonely inventor, I spent gazillion dollars on my invention no. Tell me why it's going to benefit me, the company, what you're showing me. Is it going to give me a competitive advantage? Are my buyers going to be interested in this? Are the consumers, is this going to be interesting to them? Because that's where my buyers come in. So when I come up with an invention, I'm all the way to the consumer. Then I'm thinking about the buyer, my licensee. So my licensee, which is the manufacturer, has to talk to the buyer, and the buyer has to work with the consumer. So I'm all the way at the end. And that's why I feel like when I'm coming up with ideas or I'm working with people, I'm envisioning all the way there, coming back and then preparing for that pitch. Okay, so it's very, very important. Be simple, minute and a half video, have clear pictures. Try not to spend too much time explaining, a lot of words to read. Just keep it simple. Let people get it. Let your product idea talk for itself. And you know what? If it's a business, what's making you different than everybody else out there? I know there's a lot of business owners that are watching and listening, so think about that. Okay, so where to find this potential licensee? So I came up with this kitchen gadget, right? Or I came up with my collapsible egg tray here. You put your eggs in, and as you put your eggs, you take your eggs out, you fold it up, and it only keeps that amount of space left. So let's say now I wanted to try to license this, which I have before, and now it's back to me. So if I wanted to license this, I would go to the storage areas of where I see and envision my product being sold. So is it going to be in Walmart or Target? So I'm going to go to those stores, Home Goods. I'm going to flip over the packages, and I'm going to look at the companies that have these storage containers. And I'm going to see if they're interested in adding my product to their product line. And that's the pitch. Okay, so go to companies where you envision your idea being sold and jot them down and start to network and find out where they're going, what trade shows they're going, what type of opportunities are coming around specifically for them. Okay, there's companies out there that are okay, they're marketing companies and they're entitled to work and do their thing. But if you want to go to the company that is in the business, right? You go and you look at where they're being sold. You go to those stores. You go to specialty stores. Wherever you see your product, envision your product being sold, those are the players. If you're online, most of the time, people just kind of buy product and they resell it. Those most likely aren't going to be manufacturers that are going to have retail distribution. I like the players. If you're going to license, go to the players in the industry. They're the ones that are going to have the biggest reach, have the biggest returns for you most of the time. And yes, their royalties might be a little bit slower, but you're going to get your product out there. And that's one thing for me. I love to see my products out there. That's why I come up with it. I want to see people use my idea for the same reason that I came up with it. That's something that's special to me. So everybody has their hidden agendas. That's mine. All right, so pitching. Yeah, it's really important to get right to the point. They may challenge you, and that's why when I work with inventors, I'm so positive, I'm optimistic about your idea. But you know what? I'm going to beat it up because I'm going to do that whether it's for you or for me, possibly representing you. I want to make sure that I have all my questions answered. I want to know what's out there, what's giving us a competitive advantage. You have this the way it is, but maybe it's this. Look at what this company is selling right now. Let's see how they're doing with that. Can we do something better for them? Is this something that's going to give them that competitive advantage with their buyers? So that's what you got to capture. You got to get right to the point and be able to give them what they're looking for. Yes, you're a nice guy, you're a nice lady, whatever it is. At the end of the day, is it something that's going to make them money? Are they going to have that competitive advantage? Are they going to impress the buyers? When they're going to trade shows, they need to have fresh product. They need to have fresh conversations with buyers that are coming to their booth. And they might have their own pipeline, but some companies say, you know what? My pipeline, we're just so tight with coming up with ideas. Let's reach out to the inventor community. And that is very exciting because it opens up the doors for us as inventors to be able to add to their product line. So we're an extension, open innovation. We're an extension of their companies and their engineering teams or product design team. Sometimes they're tight. Sometimes they are doing great, but they need to have something unique and different and fresh when they're going to these trade shows or they have buyer presentations. That's where we come in. And that's where they can come in with their own. But for us, for licensing opportunities, that's the gold. Okay? So handling objections, let's beat it up together. Look at it from a different perspective. Ask people to try it out and listen to them. Don't get offended. Don't be emotional about it. Take it very, very seriously and think about, is it something that I should make enough, change it up or make a difference to them? I was on QVC for 3 years as an on-air guest, and I had products, and I listened to one of the buyers, and she told me to make some changes, and I did. And then she gave me a PO, a purchase order. Okay, so you want to listen to your buyers. They're kind of really in the loop of who it is that they're talking to, which is the consumers. Okay, very, very important. Okay, so let's continue because I know we have Steve waiting also to give his side. So I mentioned a little earlier what a licensing deal looks like. Most of the time, you're going to give them exclusivity in the same industry. So if I'm coming up with a kitchen gadget, realistically, they're not going to want you to go to another kitchen gadget company and offer the same thing, because the reason you're going to them, like I mentioned a few times, is that you're giving them a competitive advantage. If I ended up, let's say, like I had this product, it's called pull ties. It's you take any plastic bag, cereal bag, freezer bag, you put it through the loop, you pull it up, and it seals it tight. So I licensed this to a company, and they were in the housewares kitchen gadget. But then I had a major computer store chain say that they wanted to add this because some of the people that watch it on QVC used it for wire and cable management, not just for freezer bags, bread bags and cereal bags and all that, but they used it to hold their wires together. So the company that I licensed it to, they allowed me non-exclusivity in other categories. So then I was able to go into other categories besides the housewares industry. So it's for territory. Let's say if I'm only protected in the US and the company ends up distributing in other countries, we might make a deal to say, listen, as long as you're selling it, please allow me to earn a royalty from it. It could be for a certain amount of time. Most of the time I ask for guarantee. So give me some understanding of what your expectations are, your forecasting of how many units you're going to sell per year. And if you hit it, then we're good. If you don't, then at least give me the option to be non-exclusive or to allow me to terminate the agreement. But, you know, for most of the time, if a company is not selling, they'll probably terminate it. So these are, not to get too deep into the weeds, I just gave you a quick rundown overview of what a licensing deal looks like. All right, and some other resources that are available. Look, it's important for us to get as much information as we can. I love the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, uspto.gov. Small Business Administration is really, really important. There's SBDC, Small Business Development Center. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has their Patent and Trademark Resource Center. So around the country, they have places for you to do research and see if, pull prior art, and then take what you find and then give it to a patent attorney or agent to compare and see if it's something that you can call your own, or you realize that it's just You're going to hit the brick wall, and it's okay. Are you going to continue to manufacture it yourself without intellectual property as long as you're not infringing on somebody else's IP? Or are you in the clear? And then you have these options. Do you want to license it to receive royalties, to earn royalties? Do you want to manufacture it and start your own business and build a brand? And then all of a sudden your brand explodes. And then we have Steve coming up. So I love this. This is one of my copyrights. Eat, sleep, invent, repeat. As an inventor, I think that's what I do all day. There's a couple in between of speaking to as many people as I can to help them with their inventions and running National Inventor Club and the Inventor Smart Community app. But this is something that I live by, and it keeps me moving every day. All right, so thank you and think up, and I'll share my contact information at the end also as well with Steve. But I am excited to have this guy on, Steve Manners. Steve, if you can just take a moment and touch on some of the companies that you've been involved with licensing. People might not get it at first because I went through product licensing and you're going through brand property licensing, just like I showed with Elmo and Cookie Monster. So Elmo Cookie Monster is not my invention. This snack container is my invention. A company that manufactured these snack containers went to Sesame Street, went to Nickelodeon. They asked them for permission to use their property, their brand property on my product and on their product because I license it to them. So every time one of them sells, they would have to pay me and they would have to pay Sesame Street. Steve, tell us a little bit about your background. It's amazing.
Thank you, Brian. So, so I've been in the licensing industry for over 30 years now. And I've worked for most of the major film studios, either directly. I ran 20th Century Fox licensing in Europe, and I also ran Universal Consumer Products in Europe. And then I've also worked for what's called licensing agencies. So I worked for a company called Beanstalk, who represent corporate brands and celebrities. So whilst I was there, so for example, Fox, I worked on The Simpsons. At Universal, at the time I was there, it was Fast and Furious and Curious George and properties like that. And then as an agent at Beanstalk, I worked on Vespa, Jaguar Land Rover, Paris Hilton. I handled her licensing in Europe. And then I joined Licensing International. I was a company called Wild Brain CPLG. CPLG is one of the largest licensing agencies in the world, and we had offices all over the US and actually in Europe, and now they've expanded into Asia as well. And that was properties that we actually owned, Wild Brain owned, so things like Teletubbies, Strawberry Shortcake, they part-owned Peanuts as well. But then we were also a third-party licensing agency, and I worked with companies like Hasbro and Mattel and MGM and Nickelodeon. And so very, very broad range of opportunities that I've worked on. And then 2 years ago, I joined Licensing International, which is the leading global trade organization for the brand licensing industry. So our mission is we're a member-based organization, is to connect our members to help them develop their licensing skills and their licensing programs, and offer them resources that help them strategically grow their business. We help people discover licensing. So we have a lot of members who are relatively new to the industry, and we do a lot of education and guidance for them to help them understand the business. And then to advance the cause of licensing as well. That's both on an education basis. If you talk to anyone in licensing in my side of the industry, how they got into licensing, and virtually everybody says, I just fell into it. It's not ever a career that anyone left university or college thinking that's what they were going to do. So we do a lot of education with universities and with younger people to help them understand the value of licensing as a business. So obviously Brian has talked about what is licensing, and this, by the way, is the dictionary definition of what licensing is, which frankly is the dullest expression of licensing. And really what I just wanted to say on this is licensing really is, certainly on brand licensing, it's the emotional connection between a consumer and a brand. Licensing in brand licensing terms cannot work and will not work if the consumer does not have an emotional connection. And it doesn't matter whether it's a preschool show and a child really loves the characters and wants to play with the toys or have a cuddly toy or what have you, or whether it's a corporate brand, something like Jaguar Land Rover, where the consumer wants to aspire, say, to Jaguar, and so is very interested in product that carries those Jaguar values outside of the car model itself. But without that emotional connection, licensing just can't happen and won't work. So I'm just going to take you through some of the key areas of licensing that some of you will be familiar with and some may be new to you. Toys, obviously one of the best known, one of the biggest parts of the business, and probably one that most people are familiar with from a licensing point of view. And is actually one of the biggest categories as well, alongside apparel. This is, you've all seen licensed t-shirts and things out in the marketplace. It's one of the most immediate products that you tend to see when a program starts to break through. And it's a lot of activity in this space. And we're seeing a lot of things at the moment because of the recession, because of COVID. There's a real desire for products that and brands that people remember from their childhood. So you're seeing a lot in the teen and young adult space of things that they remember. It's why strawberry shortcake, for example, classic strawberry shortcake, is doing so well in the market, particularly in the US at the moment.
Steve, Steve, I see here there's a lot of questions about trademarks in the chat. You know, it's interesting, Steve, because a lot of these that you're showing are kind of trademarked type of brands that are out there already. So it's you can actually build. So for example, and this is what Steve is kind of going through. So let's say that you came up with or you have t-shirts that you sell, and you say, you know what, my t-shirts are selling good. You know, I have a nice design around the neck or whatever it is that's unique. So I'm gonna go to Strawberry Shortcake and I'm gonna ask Strawberry Shortcake, hey, would you be interested? I would like to add your Strawberry Shortcake to my shirts. And a lot of times these companies go to like the apparel, because apparel is a strong seller, where they kind of start off with this and then they branch out into other classes of trademarks where they can now ask the brand to be able to rent the rights to their intellectual property. So remember when I was talking about the other licensing, earning royalties from your product? Well, Steve is talking about, let's say I'm selling these socks. Now I have to pay for that brand. I have to pay them in advance. I have to pay them every time one of them sells when I have Corona Extra on my hat. So it's really interesting. So you can create out of trademarks, Steve, you can create a whole brand of product that sells.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. As long as there is the consumer interest and the consumer desire. But you're seeing a lot of activity in the brand space, what we call the corporate brand space. So whilst entertainment has historically been the biggest category, there's a lot of movement going on in other spaces at the moment as well. So automotive, for example, is particularly actually in the US, automotive is a big category. So this is car accessories. People want to personalize their cars and use their favorite characters and properties to do that. Health and beauty is one of the biggest growth areas right now. We're seeing a lot of activity in this space. And just so you know, and going slightly off piste here a little bit, but a lot of the luxury brands, so companies like Prada and Tommy Hilfiger and Gucci and Christian Dior do not make their own fragrance. They are all licensed to another company. So there's about 6 major fragrance houses in the world, and most of the luxury brands actually license those, as they do with watches and as they do with sunglasses as well. Doesn't diminish the importance of them, doesn't mean that they're less valid as products. They just use experts to actually do it, although they have very clear, very strong oversight about everything that happens. But that side of the business tends to be a little bit hidden, to be honest. They won't divulge too much information about that. But then what we're seeing is a lot of other brands are now getting into health and beauty as well. So that's not just fragrance. You're seeing a lot of activity in makeup as well right now. And food and beverage is another big growth area. So you're seeing a lot of either, it can be two companies in the food space coming together, like you've got Guinness here with potato chips, so it's Guinness flavored potato chips. A lot of movement as well in alcohol. So you're seeing a lot of licensed wines and spirits as well happening right now. And then footwear. I have to be honest, when I first came into the industry, you couldn't do any licensed footwear apart from few kids' slippers. This has been a big growth category, and we're seeing a lot of activity. You probably have seen Puma and Adidas doing a lot of licensed footwear, and there's a lot of short runs, so very collectible runs that are done in this space. And then pet accessories have seen huge growth. It's estimated that about 50% of people in the world have a pet. It went up significantly during COVID. So, and people that have grown up and are used to buying licensed product or product that features their favorite characters also want their dogs to like and their cats to like the same characters. And then there's just some other categories that you'll see licensing. Location-based entertainment, which is by far the biggest growth area at the moment. It used to be really just things like theme parks, but now it's extended into retailtainment. So things that you may find happening in shopping malls. You may have seen things like the Bridgerton experience that Netflix have licensed out. Gambling, much bigger in the US actually, so that's slot machines and things like that you'll find in Vegas and Atlanta, and also the lotteries that happen in different states. Promotions is where it tends to be a short run of one product borrowing the IP from another, usually a food product. So you might see a lot on cereals and things like that, or a McDonald's Happy Meal or something like that is a promotion. And then briefly, clip licensing is where companies may do an advertisement. You probably see a lot of them at the Super Bowl, where they take a clip from a movie and integrate it into their ad campaign, and that's called clip licensing. So, what are the benefits of licensing from a brand licensing point of view? The key one is storytelling. It's a way to extend the life cycle and the experience that someone can have with their property into a different product area, and we call that storytelling. So that it helps with the engagement from the consumer. It helps with getting engagement from retailers. It gives retailers a point of difference on sometimes very competitive product, and gives them a bit of white space that they've got something a little bit different than their competitors. And also revenue. Now, to be honest, if you're talking to any entertainment company, revenue will probably be the number one priority when it comes to licensing. They want to recoup on the investment they've made into the animation or the film. Less important when it comes to corporate brands. Revenue features, but they are going to be much more cautious about what they do. They will do nothing that damages the main brand itself. So they're much more cautious, will do much less licensing than entertainment companies will. And then just to let you know who the key players, and obviously Brian has mentioned some of these, but the licensor is the IP owner. So the film studio, the TV production company, Netflix, Jaguar Land Rover, or what have you, those are the licensors. The licensee is the manufacturer who is taking the license and is going to manufacture the products. And then obviously the retailer, which is an all-important component. If the retailer will not open their doors and will not stock the product, then it's very, very challenging, even with the growth of online. And then there's other areas that you'll find that product development is a very important part of licensing. So that's the people who actually oversee the design of the product and the application of the property onto the product itself. marketing and PR, and that happens both from a licensor point of view and then also from a licensee point of view. And then operations, which is the back end, obviously legal, finance, very, very important part, sometimes gets overlooked, shouldn't, because it holds everything together. And just briefly to just take you through the process of a licensing deal. So the first thing is that the terms, the commercial terms, and I'll just give you a little bit more detail on those in a minute. Then there's what's called a deal memo, which is basically just a summary of all the key commercial terms, which then has to be approved just by the licensee and the licensor. That gets turned into a long form contract. The licensee then pays the advance or the minimum guarantee, and I'll explain that a little bit more detail in a minute. The creative assets are then released to the licensee so that they can start working on designing the product. Every stage of design has to go through product approval. So that has to be done sent through to the licensor. Usually these days it's on an online system. And sell-in can also then start to the retailers. Then it's manufactured and shipped. Then it's launched at retail. And then every quarter, the licensing has to report and remit royalties on any sales that have been made to the licensor. So just to give you a sense of what are the key things, I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of the key things to be very wary of and very careful of when you're looking at licensing contracts is they can be a bit unwieldy. And if you're working with one of the studios, for example, they're not very flexible on the actual overall terms in a contract. It's really nothing too much to worry about as long as you've been very clear on the contract basics. And I'll give a couple of examples in a minute of some of those that will just to watch out for. The one thing I will just mention, which is very different than what Brian talked about earlier with patent licensing, most, and particularly in the entertainment side of the business, most contracts are non-exclusive unless it's a worldwide deal. So one of the big toy companies, one of the gaming companies, where the investment is so high, they will give exclusivity. Most entertainment contracts are non-exclusive, and that, by the way, is nothing to worry about. It's just that there are territories on how it works, and so they tend to be non-exclusive, but that doesn't mean that they're going to double license everything. That very rarely happens, I have to be honest. And then from a revenue point of view, a licensing contract is based on three key things: an advance, which is an amount payable on signature, the guarantee, which is the business that the licensee is committing to for the term of the contract, and then the royalties, because the advance and the guarantee are all offset against the royalties that they've agreed to pay, which is a percentage of usually the wholesale sales of the product. And then the channels of distribution, and in the US, you can be very, very specific about the channels of distribution that you're allowed to sell into. You cannot do that in the European markets. The Treaty of Rome and fair trading doesn't allow it. So you have to give everybody unlimited retail distribution. You can't specify specific retail distribution. And then this is just an example of how a poorly worded contract to a best worded contract is. If you say something like Batman as a property, there's so many different iterations of Batman. Which Batman property do you actually mean? So it's very clear. You really need to be very precise about what the property that you're licensing. In terms of the term, different territories express dates in different ways. So, for example, in the US, you say the month first, and then the day, and then the year. In the UK, we have the day first, then the month, then the year. So if you express it in numbers, it can cause confusion. So always the best way is to write it out. So 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 2025. That just makes it very clear, and everybody's very clear. Similarly, on the territory, you don't just say Europe in a contract. People's interpretation of Europe can change, and it may be slightly different. So you always specify the actual countries that you mean. And then the products, if you just gave someone apparel, that's a very broad category. So again, you're very specific about whether it's kids, whether it's adults, and then the actual product that you're licensing, you're allowing them to license. And then the other key thing, as I mentioned, is the royalty rates. And this just gives you a sense of what the typical royalty rates are. The main one, generally, it's 12 to 16%. 16% tends to be, honestly, Disney. But the standard for most companies is 12 to 14. That's where most will sit. It will be lower in some of the FMCG areas, so things like food and beverage, where it's a lower cost point, but very low margin, but very high unit sales. And then location-based entertainment can be very broad depending on the type of license deal it is. And then, as I mentioned, distribution, you can be very precise in the US about where you can distribute, less so in other territories. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the value of licensing and where this sits in the business right now. We have just published our 2024 annual survey. Literally, it came out earlier this month. And the value of the business is now at 356.5 billion sales of products and services at retail, which was another record-breaking year and is up 4.59% on 2022. The key thing, though, is that licensed products and services outperformed the overall worldwide retail market, which had a 3.7% growth. And what we're seeing is that brands that are licensing their products out and licensees that are using that IP are really benefiting at retail because the consumer are really engaging with licensing, and it gives the retailer a point of difference. So along with white label goods and own labels, you're finding that licensed products is actually performing really well at retail. I know we're running over, so I won't go into this, but just the key markets is North America is the biggest market, followed by Western Europe, and then Asia as well. And as I mentioned earlier, entertainment and characters are the biggest part of the business, followed by corporate brands, and sports is an incredibly strong area at the moment. We're seeing a lot of growth there as well. These are the product categories. So what I talked about before was the where the properties come from, which area of the business. These are the top 10 product categories. So apparel is number 1. Toys is number 2. It used to be number 1, and it's the only category that had a slight decline this year over last year, partly driven by the fact that a lot of movies weren't coming out. There weren't some of those movie properties that often drive toy sales. But you can see the different categories here. And that's it. I hope that was helpful and interesting.
That was awesome. You know what I remember, Steve? That my daughter's 22 now, but growing up, I used to spend an extra $1, $2. So Band-Aids would be X amount, and if I had the princesses on it, I would have to pay $2 more, or a SpongeBob on different types of food that we bought. So it's a big industry. What's that?
Which did you prefer? Which did she prefer?
I don't remember. All I know is it cost me more. So it's thriving. That was $300-something billion of just extensions and entertainment and food and beauty and health. There's so much that is spent on different brand properties. So thank you so much for that, Steve. That was amazing.